Great to have you along for the ride. Thanks a lot for stopping by. Glad to have this man on. His name is Jeff Clark. He's a former U.S. DOJ double assistant AG. I don't know what that means. You can tell us. Also a law aficionado. Jeff, how are you? Good to see you, man.
I'm good. How are you doing, Joe?
I'm doing great. What is a double assistant AG? I don't get it. So you were two assistant AGs at once?
Yes. So I was Senate confirmed Assistant Attorney General of the Environment and Natural Resources Division at DOJ, Main Justice. There are 7 litigating divisions there. And then I was also tapped to run the Civil Division at the same time. So Then I became the acting Assistant Attorney General of that. So I ran 2 out of the 7 divisions simultaneously. I was the only Trump Assistant Attorney General, AAG for short, to do that.
I love it. Well, listen, I'm honored to talk to you today. I saw the article that you posted over on your X the other day. Go follow him I think it's at Jeff Clark, right?
At Jeff Clark US on X and Getter.
Okay, go and follow him on both platforms right now if you're on those platforms. I want to get into that in a second, but you having all this experience in the DOJ, let me ask you a question you had no idea was coming. Matthew Colangelo, the number 3 guy in the DOJ, decides to take a massive demotion and completely change his course, his professional course and career, to go back to a local DA's office and help Alvin Bragg prosecute Donald Trump. Probably nothing to see there, right?
Oh, it's completely transparent, Joe, that that is an engineered move.
Yes.
Look, at DOJ, I had extensive experience with the Associate's Office. It's a strange title, but that's the number 3 position in DOJ. The first position is the AG, then the Deputy AG, then the Associate AG. And the Associate AG has 5 of those 7 litigating divisions reporting to them. And they mostly deal with civil litigation. Way back closer in time to when they started the associate position, it was flipped. And the associate attorney general, who was Rudy Giuliani, dealt with mostly criminal matters. But these days, and for quite some time, it's been mostly civil matters. So here's a guy who was the so-called PDAG, the principal deputy associate attorney general. So since there was no associate that was Senate confirmed, he became the acting. So he is acting as the number 3 official in the entire federal Justice Department. And then he gives that up in order to become a line prosecutor for Alvin Bragg in one county's district attorney's office. That is the world's worst and most inexplicable career move, unless you're doing it to get Donald Trump. And that's clearly what they did. And they engineered it for that purpose. And actually, I saw him argue on a day I went up to watch President Trump's trial in Manhattan.
It's Jeff Clark. Go and follow him everywhere. Jeff Clark US on Getter and also on X. You know, when that happened, first of all, they tried to resurrect a case where you had a bunch of dead misdemeanors that were way past the statute of limitation, had to change a law or something to try to connect them to federal elections law, although the FEC said there were no problems. They weren't even going to investigate it. It's an absolute bogus, made-up nothing case. But what really jumps out, and you're right, it was transparent in what they actually did, is Joe Biden has said, no, he didn't talk to this guy. Merrick Garland has said, no, we didn't send that guy. Almost like he doesn't even know who the guy is. I don't know that Kamala Harris has chimed in on it, but why did they think we're so stupid that we would believe that this guy was not earmarked to go and get Trump? I mean, my 9-year-old daughter said, hey, Dad, they're going to get Trump, right? Can you pass the potatoes? I mean, that's how simple this is, right?
Yes, it is that simple. And look, they think that we're that stupid because they still control the mainstream media or the lamestream media or propaganda media, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
And they just dish out these lies. I just saw a piece from the New York Times last week, and they were saying, Trump's going to weaponize the Justice Department. It's really troubling. But, Trump points out that actually the Justice Department's been weaponized against him. And then their response is, but the difference is that there's no indication that President Biden had anything to do with any of the lawfare against President Trump. Well, that's bunk. And it shows that the New York Times is not following other media sources, because America First Legal got access through FOIA to documents that show that Joe Biden personally signed an order that allowed special access to President Trump's documents so that they could run the Jack Smith, Mar-a-Lago raid, et cetera. So, they just lie and they think they're going to get away with it. That's what, you're here to counteract. That's what I try to counteract on X and on my media appearances. And, we're winning. I think mainstream media is dying.
I'm with you. I think that mainstream media is probably trusted less than Congress, and that's saying a lot if you trust less than Congress. It's Jeff Clark. Go and follow him everywhere. I want to move on from that in a second, but saying that Joe Biden had no idea and had nothing to do with it is like saying Joe Biden didn't call Hunter Biden's friends and associates, like Joe Biden didn't meet his friends and associates, like Joe Biden didn't know he was working for Burisma, where he's actually golfing with his Burisma buddies, and Joe Biden had nothing to do with extorting Ukraine for $1 billion if you don't fire that prosecutor. Again, people are waking up, are they not? I hope they are, or is it just you and me?
I hope they are. I think more and more people are waking up. But look, I have a sophisticated friend who went to law school with me, right? He's on the other side of the political world, and he's a managing partner of a major law firm based in California, but in their DC office. And I can remember, when for us, it was commonplace knowledge of that panel presentation that Joe Biden did that you referred to offhandedly at the Council on Foreign Relations, where he's like, what do you know? Like, they dropped the prosecution after I told them they weren't going to get the $1 billion, right? I was like, you know about that, right? And he was like, no, he had no idea. He actually thought that, this was from some weird conspiracy corner of the internet. And I said, no, Joe Biden's on videotape saying this and bragging about it.
It's stunning. Well, hopefully more people are starting to wake up. With Joe Biden pushed out of the way, the focus is now on Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, depending on what poll you look at, either had 1.9% or 3% support from her own party in 2019, where she was forced to drop out before Iowa happened. I think Tulsi Gabbard, I thought she did anyway, ended her political career. Suddenly, after calling Joe Biden a racist to his face, is named as the vice presidential nominee and somehow becomes the vice president. We know her history of dating Montel. And we know that she also grew up a middle-class child in Oakland, but really was in an upper-class area of Montreal, where she ended up graduating high school and had lived there 5, 6, 7 years. She says she works at McDonald's. We can't figure out any timeline or which McDonald's. Says she owns a Glock. Hasn't said what number Glock it is, what model it is, or when she got it. And she's also been the most tough on crime, especially transnational gangs, that we've ever seen as a prosecutor. There's nothing to learn here, Jeff. I mean, this person all of a sudden is the rising star, and we should just shut up about her, no?
Yeah, that's what they say. I mean, to me, she's like Little Miss Puffery, right? Every time I try to probe into her background, right, I can't find any hard evidence. So she says she loves this phrase of, I prosecuted transnational gangs. She loves the idea that she's supposed to be, from small neighborhoods where people manicure their lawns. I watched the Howard Stern interview she did where, he's like, you're just a girl from the hood. And then later on, it comes out from both of them that, she grew up in Montreal, right? Just as you said.
It's crazy.
So, they can't contradict themselves in the course of one interview. But look, here's something
let me stop you there, because all of that is great. And I think you were probably going to go there. I think that you're actually ahead of me. Did she prosecute transnational drug cartels and gangs in stopping sex trafficking, human trafficking, and fentanyl?
There's no indication that she has personally prosecuted those things. So it's possible that cases like that were brought by the district attorney's office in San Francisco when she ran that. It's also possible that they ran cases like that when she was the California AG. But what I wanted to probe into is, Joe, how did she get to where she was before she got these two elective offices, one local and one statewide? And I don't see any basis for her rising to that level of qualifications. And she ran in the Democratic primary against this guy, Mr. Fazio, who called her out on the fact that she actually hadn't prosecuted a lot of cases. She claimed she prosecuted hundreds, and he probed on that at a debate, and she conceded, 50. And so, look, if there's 50, I should be able to locate some trial transcript somewhere. Someone should be able to locate a trial transcript.
Yeah.
California lawyers, other lawyers like me, in the major cities like New York City or Washington, D.C., we cannot find it. And I have directly challenged
You can't find
her.
any cases?
No, the only thing I see is there's a Politico article, and the Politico article says that she prosecuted 2 cases, which really look like one case that, is supposed to have gone on for some ridiculous number of days that doesn't make any sense. And maybe the 2 cases were split because it was 2 defendants and they called for separate trials. But, I called the reporter. His name was Eric He, at Politico. And I said, okay, you wrote this article. You said you reviewed the transcripts and you basically wrote a glowing article that said she did a good job. Can you send me a copy of the transcripts? And the answer was, I don't have the transcripts. They're at the courthouse. And I looked at them there. And then when I probed on, well, how did you know about these cases? How did you know to try to get these transcripts from the courthouse? he wouldn't answer me. It was all very vague. And so I have a personal theory that basically someone from her campaign called up Politico, and they basically placed a story, and they wrote it. Maybe they looked at some transcripts, maybe they didn't, but no one can show me the transcripts.
That's stunning. It's Jeff Clark US over on X, also on Getter. It is JEFFCLARK US, right?
That's correct.
Just want to make sure everybody go and follow Jeff right now. When it comes to Kamala Harris, what you just said was reminiscent for me, and it made me think of Barack Obama. And here's what I mean. It might be a dumb question, and I concede it might be. But Barack Obama defeated an Illinois senator, a state senator, who was long in that job, was, I believe, a black woman, and suddenly they pushed her aside, and he somehow rose to the top, became a state senator. He went and gave a speech in 2004 at the DNC, becomes a U.S. senator. Then suddenly he's the president of the United States. I'm starting to see from what you said, it just signaled in my mind, we might be seeing the same sort of path, no?
Yes. So I'll tell you the similarities and then a couple important differences that put Kamala Harris on the bad side of that comparison. So look, it's very suspicious how Obama went from Occidental College to Columbia. There's a Columbia professor who said, look, basically every student who's gone through here has taken one of my classes because I teach some of the big ones. Right. I've never heard of this guy before. Right. Then he winds up at the Harvard Law School, and I've heard from some of his classmates that he didn't go to class often. They didn't say that he wasn't there, but they did say the idea that he could get elected to be president of the law review, given, his kind of spotty attendance record seems a little bit odd. And then he becomes a community organizer, right? And then, magically, he turns into a starring role speaking at a Democratic National Convention, and then, becomes the presidential candidate. But at least, Joe, in terms of his legal career, I'm easily able to find two things. I can find a handful, maybe 4 or 5 briefs that he's on Westlaw appearing on, where he's the junior person because he was a young lawyer at the time before he became a community organizer. And I can find that he did teach as a lecturer at the University of Chicago Law School. So, but I can't find the equivalent personal, actually in the weeds lawyering that Kamala Harris did. I can't find a single example of it.
Jeff was, obviously Willie Brown, very powerful guy in San Francisco and in all of California. Is it as simple as saying her relationship with him is why we know who she is?
I think so, because look, she gets the job as an assistant district attorney after being an intern while in law school. And in listening to the Howard Stern interview, I heard that she did her first prosecution, which was a DUI case that she says she won while she was a law clerk. And, that has the ring of truth. Then she goes and she works on sex crimes for them in the Alameda District Attorney's Office as an assistant. And then she gets put on several boards where, interestingly enough, she also had spotty attendance records. And then, she runs for district attorney. And again, her opponents are hitting her on the fact of what are your credentials? What is your real experience compared to me, who's, really first chaired a large number of trials in the relevant office, to run for this. And the answer is she was just, politically knighted or politically blessed by very high up patrons and money people in San Francisco.
Very interesting. Jeff Clark, U.S. over on X and over on Getter. Go and follow him. He's got a great post from the other day that made me reach out to you and say, please come on the show. You're talking about how light on crime, on violent and really, really serious crime, Kamala Harris was. Now, was this as a prosecutor or as the AG?
This was as a prosecutor. The big case that I think caught your attention is one from 2008 where there was an illegal alien and he somehow managed to get a job with a party bus company, seemingly run, based on the name from maybe someone who was an immigrant from Africa. They didn't run any background checks on him, any even checks to confirm that he had a commercial driver's license, no indication of checking that he was, what was his immigration status. And they hired him to cart around, essentially, let me not sugarcoat it, drunk people from one nightclub in San Francisco to the next, right? Yes. So they're going to be people in vulnerable positions for an entire evening in this guy's hands, going from one nightclub to the next. And so what happens is he goes to a nightclub one night, and everybody piles out to go in. They're supposed to have been able to just show armbands that they had that were prearranged that let them go inside.
Right.
But, the bouncers decided they're going to check IDs. So they check IDs, and there are a couple women who can't get through, because they don't have the right ID. So they have to go back and chill out on the bus. And so this bus driver, illegal alien guy who's never been checked, he drives them to like a dark alley, and he winds up with the help of his cousin, raping this married young woman in her 20s and traumatizing her. And then, ultimately, to fast forward, Kamala Harris is the district attorney at the time. She doesn't personally prosecute this case. There's a guy named Adrian Ivancevich, who's actually the line prosecutor. So yet another example where I can't find her, personally doing something.
Right.
And, they give this guy a sweetheart deal of 3 years. And I just, look, rape used to be a capital offense in the United States.
There are many of us who think that rape should be like you die. Yes.
Yes. And so, here's this guy. He comes in illegally to our country. He has a criminal record, which the bus company didn't find out, which is why they get sued and they have to, make a big payout to the husband and wife. The wife is the victim who got raped.
Right.
And, he had a domestic violence conviction. Right. So this is a guy who never should have been around, drunk young people, driving them from one nightclub to the other, let alone really being employed. It's only because of the sanctuary city policies of San Francisco that this is even conceivable. And, he gets 3 years in a plea deal. And, I find it to be extraordinary. Like lots of states would have thrown him away for a lot longer than that. Yeah. And what I'm hearing back, in terms of, what is the pushback? First of all, there's no official response from the campaign or from Kamala Harris, even though I've tagged her multiple times and I've called for show me your trial transcripts where you were first chair trial lawyer. It's been crickets. But, look, the statutes say you can get 3, 6, or 8 years for rape in California. But, I look at the sentencing guidelines and, they just didn't apply basic things that would have hiked up the sentence, like the fact that he used his cousin to basically keep the other woman on the bus occupied, and he kind of served as a lookout. Well, that means that you're talking about a rape conspiracy, and that hikes up the number of years.
Well, I think one can say it's also kidnapping. He takes her away somewhere and absconds with her to go do this horrible crime. I mean, you could say kidnapping, hostage holding. I mean, you could do any number of things on top of it, but they don't do that. And I think the operative question is this, Jeff: does Kamala Harris, as the DA, is she the one who signs off on it?
Oh yeah,
on
absolutely.
The plea deal.
Her name is at the top of the pleadings in the case and at the top of the transcript of the sentencing, where most of that is occupied by a victim impact statement by the woman who was sadly raped, who talks about the impact on her life, right? Like it ruined her college career, ruined relationships. She almost got divorced, and on, all as a result of this, creepy guy who, never should have been in the country in the first place. That's point number one.
Yeah.
Number two, especially never should have been in the country after he engaged in domestic violence. And then third, I mean, it's really 3 strikes. Like this guy should have been, ejected into, the greatest depths of whatever country he came from to San Francisco.
Was he not deported afterwards, after he served his time? Do we know?
I don't know.
Well, I hope so, but California, maybe not.
Yeah, I know. I mean, he might have just benefited from the sanctuary city policies and he's back out on the streets after his 3 years. I mean, this is 2008. So his sentence, even if he served the full time, would have ended in 2011.
Let me ask you one more question. It's Jeff Clark. His website is AmericaRenewing.com. AmericaRenewing.com. Go follow him over on X out on Getter. It's Jeff Clark US. One last question on this. How hard would it have been for the big media to dig up even anything? To just ask the question, what was she the lead attorney on? Is that really hard to do?
No, it's not that hard, right? So I ran, basic Westlaw searches. That's a computerized legal research service. It's probably the biggest one in the country. There's another one. It's a competitor, and I can't, find any example of her having argued an appeal, for instance. And look, if you look at the red state attorney generals, these guys, they take on, the major appeals and they do them themselves. Like I'm thinking about people like Chris Kobach in, AG of Kansas. And there's some other examples of folks like that. So
I'm guessing AG, Andrew Bailey. I'm guessing Ken Paxton. I'm guessing these guys are going to be out in front of it because A, that's your job. And B, you want the big cases. That's kind of why you became a lawyer.
Yeah, and you at the very least you want the experience of it, right? Why
Yes.
wouldn't you want to try to at least get one Supreme Court argument out of it? Why wouldn't you at least try to appear once in front of the Ninth Circuit? That's the federal court of appeals out there, and California has lots of matters there.
Right.
Why wouldn't you want to argue in front of the California Supreme Court? Like, and on and on. So there's no evidence of that, and that's really easy to find. Westlaw's coverage of appeal decisions is, in my experience, like 99.5%. And then trial things can be harder to find, but any source I've tried to use to find it, right, I haven't been able to find it. And I find the whole Politico story of, well, we looked at transcripts, but we don't physically have them anymore. And I do have one more drop at least on this. So this will be my teaser for your audience. So follow my X account tomorrow that I'm going to put out tomorrow about my research into this.
All right, go and follow him right now. Jeff Clark US over on X. It's also on Getter. His website, AmericaRenewing.com. It's Jeff Clark. Jeff, we're frankly out of time. Let's do this again soon. I love that you've done the research. I love that it wasn't that hard, and we can call out the media for not doing any legwork at all. And we really need to know who this person is that tens of millions are lining up waiting to vote for. I really appreciate the work. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Joe. Good to be on.
All right, brother. We're back after this. Stay right here.